Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into one of the most critical and alarming developments in modern geopolitics, the slow but undeniable unraveling of Vladimir Putin's control over Russia. Many are calling it Soviet Collapse 2.0, and for good reason. The warning signs are everywhere: political infighting, economic freefall, military humiliation, and growing unrest across the vast Russian Federation. This isn't just about losing a war in Ukraine. It's about losing the grip on an entire system that has kept Putin's power intact for over 2 decades. For years, Putin's regime has projected strength, stability, and control. The image of a man restoring Russia's greatness after the chaos of the 1990s. But beneath that surface lies a crumbling foundation. The Russian economy, once buoyed by oil and gas, now faces historic sanctions, isolation, and declining revenues. The ruble has crashed to record lows, inflation is rising sharply, and the government is burning through reserves to prop up its currency. Industries that once depended on Western technology, from aviation to energy, are breaking down. Planes can't get spare parts. Factories can't get microchips, and even basic consumer goods are becoming scarce in some regions. Putin's war in Ukraine was supposed to show Russian dominance. Instead, it exposed the weaknesses of his entire system. The military, once feared, has been revealed as outdated, corrupt, and poorly led. Tens of thousands of soldiers have died, elite units have been destroyed, and morale is collapsing. The Wagner mutiny earlier in 2023 sent shockwaves through the Kremlin, proving that even Putin's most loyal forces could turn against him. The sight of armed mercenaries marching toward Moscow, unopposed, was perhaps the clearest sign yet that control is slipping. The fact that Wagner's leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, later died in a suspicious plane crash only reinforced the image of a regime devouring itself from within. Inside Russia, the political elite is fracturing. For years, Putin kept his oligarchs and generals loyal through fear and money. But now, both are running out. The sanctions have cut off access to Western banks and luxury assets, while the war drains the state budget. Many of Putin's inner circle quietly fear what comes next, not just losing power, but losing everything. When loyalty becomes too costly, betrayal is never far behind. Behind closed doors, infighting and blame-shifting have begun. Some favor escalating the war, others want to negotiate, and a few are even considering ways to distance themselves from the president altogether. Ordinary Russians, too, are feeling the cracks. The promise of stability, the one thing Putin offered, has vanished. Young men are fleeing the country to avoid the draft, professionals are leaving for better lives abroad, and small protests, though crushed quickly, keep reappearing. In regions like Dagestan and Bashkortostan, local anger is rising over the disproportionate number of ethnic minorities sent to die in Ukraine. It's no longer just a Moscow problem. The discontent is spreading across the Federation. The longer the war drags on, the harder it becomes to hide the truth from the public. Russia is bleeding economically, militarily, and socially. Meanwhile, the Kremlin's propaganda machine, once so effective, is beginning to lose its power. The same old slogans about denazifying Ukraine or defending against NATO ring hollow when the body bags come home and prices at the grocery store double. Even state television, tightly controlled as it is, has started to show hints of doubt. Some prominent propagandists have turned on each other, blaming generals, the West, or even Putin himself for the disasters on the battlefield. When the narrative breaks, fear alone can't keep a system alive. Internationally, Russia's isolation grows deeper every month. China, once seen as a reliable partner, is keeping its distance, careful not to be dragged down by Putin's failures. Central Asian countries that used to rely on Moscow now look to Turkey and Beijing instead. Even Armenia, a longtime ally, has begun to move away from Russia's orbit. In Africa and the Middle East, Russian influence built through Wagner and oil deals is fading as instability grows. The myth of Russia as a superpower is collapsing, and with it, Putin's image as a master strategist. Inside the Kremlin, paranoia reigns. Putin has replaced loyal officials with even more loyal ones, but loyalty doesn't equal competence. The security services are watching everyone, ministers are afraid to make decisions, and corruption eats away at every level of government. The more control Putin tries to impose, the less effective the system becomes. It's the same spiral that doomed the Soviet Union in the 1980s: fear, stagnation, and denial. The Kremlin pretends everything is fine, but reality is closing in. The comparison to the Soviet collapse is becoming impossible to ignore. Back then, it wasn't one big event that ended the USSR. It was a series of small, unstoppable failures. Economic decline, military humiliation in Afghanistan, and growing unrest in the republics all chipped away at the system until it simply imploded. Today, the pattern is eerily similar. The war in Ukraine is Putin's Afghanistan. The sanctions are today's version of the economic stagnation of the late Soviet era. The growing calls for regional autonomy mirror the early cracks in the Soviet Union's unity. History doesn't repeat exactly, but it often rhymes. And right now, Russia is rhyming with 1991. What's different this time is the speed. Social media and modern communications mean that information spreads fast, even in a censored society. Russians can see through the lies faster than their Soviet predecessors could. Soldiers at the front post videos exposing corruption. Families of the dead share their grief online, and activists continue to leak documents showing the depth of the crisis. The Kremlin tries to shut it all down, but the truth keeps slipping through the cracks. You can't control the narrative forever when your entire system is built on deception. Another sign of Putin's declining grip is the growing independence of regional leaders. Some governors are quietly ignoring Kremlin directives, focusing instead on protecting their own territories and people. The Chechen leader, Ramzan Kadyrov, once Putin's most aggressive ally, has started to act more like a warlord than a subordinate. The balance of power is shifting, and when local leaders stop obeying Moscow, the Federation itself begins to weaken. So, what comes next? No one can predict exactly how or when Putin's control will collapse, but the trajectory is clear. Whether it happens through internal rebellion, a palace coup, or a slow economic death spiral, the system is unsustainable. The Russian people are growing tired. The elite is turning restless, and the world is watching a slow-motion implosion. It might not look exactly like 1991, but the essence is the same. An empire stretched too far, led by an isolated ruler who refuses to face reality. Putin's legacy, once defined by stability and power, may soon be remembered as the man who repeated the same mistakes that destroyed the Soviet Union. His obsession with control has become his downfall. Instead of reforming Russia, he militarized it. Instead of strengthening the economy, he turned it into a war machine. And instead of securing his nation's future, he has trapped it in a cycle of fear, lies, and decline. The longer he clings to power, the more painful the collapse will be, not just for the Kremlin, but for millions of ordinary Russians who will bear the consequences. As the world watches the unraveling of Putin's empire, one truth becomes clear. History has a way of catching up with those who ignore its lessons. Just as the Soviet Union once seemed too big to fail, until it did, so too does Putin's Russia appear strong on the surface, but rotten underneath. The question is no longer whether the system will fall, but when and how violently. The era of Putin's unchallenged rule is ending, and what comes after may reshape not just Russia, but the entire global order. Thank you for watching, and if you want to stay informed on the world's most important developments and their hidden meanings, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more updates from Frontline Report.